Hi guys, it's Mark Zicree, Mr. Sci-Fi, also known as Mark Zicree of Space Command, and Happy New Year! It's been an exciting holiday season for us here at the Zicree household, and also a very good 2019. I think it's going to be a very good 2020. Lots to talk about, and sorry I haven't been posting more frequently. It's been extremely busy. I'm going to cover some of the TV shows I've been watching, the science fiction shows. I've seen some of their entire seasons over the holidays, and but also, as you know, Mark Zicree of Space Command, and so we've reopened the Space Command studios. We basically have the alien spaceship sets, the stuff from Cloverfield Paradox, spacesuits, all sorts of stuff. And we're going to be rolling camera in January. So we'll be letting everyone who has different cameos coming over the next few months and so forth, walk-on roles, we'll let them all know about it. We're going to be releasing the first hour of Space Command with 5.1 surround sound, the whole thing as downloadable content to our backers, and we'll also be releasing it as webisodes in the coming weeks on Mr. Sci-Fi, because I know a lot of you don't have an hour to spend at a sitting, so I thought maybe little bite-sized chunks would be good. But it has 900 visual effect shots, and we're cranking through the second hour, finishing that off, and we've got the third hour shot, and we're going to be shooting the fourth hour in January, February, March. And our plan this year is to shoot all 12 hours of Space Command the first season, plus we're shooting a science fiction film of Elaine's called Ashes, plus we're going to be shooting all 6 pilots of the Showrunners Network that I'm creating with people like Farscape creator Rockne O'Bannon and Expanse creators and showrunners Mark Ferguson, Hawk Ostby, and on and on and on. It's going to be amazing. 6 new series, 6 shot pilots, the first of which will star Mike Harney from Orange is the New Black and Project Blue Book, and it's going to be Mira Furlan from Babylon 5, and Robert Picardo from Star Trek Voyager and Stargate Atlantis, and many, many, many other wonderful, wonderful, wonderful actors. And so lots to come very, very soon. And again, if you want to buy Space Command shares, you can push the button down there, or you can pledge to our GoFundMe campaign. You should absolutely subscribe to Mr. Sci-Fi, ding the bell, because we're going to be showing a lot of great stuff coming very, very soon down the pike. So, and let's see what else. Now, it's been a fascinating time, because at this point, we basically have the freedom to shoot whatever we want, to do whatever we want. And we have such wonderful actors to work with, and you're going to be thrilled at what you're going to see. It's just going to be spectacular. So, and we're building the futuristic car and tons of other stuff. So, much more to tell you very, very soon. But thanks for taking the journey with us, and thanks for being part of this amazing science fiction universe. So let's just talk about a little bit about some of the shows that are on. Now, as many of you know, Space Command started because I wanted to create a hopeful vision of the future, something that would say we can come together across boundaries and barriers and create a future worth living in. And I strongly believe that, and of course Gene Roddenberry taught me that lesson with his original Star Trek series. There's a huge number of science fiction shows on the air now. Every major network tends to have one, more or less, and there's very high production quality, very high level of care put into these. No one is doing these shows out of cynicism or a desire to just make a quick buck. They're all putting their hearts and souls into these shows to varying degrees of effectiveness. So let's just start with For All Mankind, which is created by my friend Ron Moore, who also did Outlander, also did Battlestar Galactica brilliantly, started on Star Trek The Next Generation, rose up through the ranks. Great guy. And the notion of For All Mankind is this great notion, which is, what if the Russians had landed on the moon, had beaten us to the punch, and we had continued then the manned space missions, and how would that have changed our history and the world's history? And it's a fascinating show. The cast is very, very good. The writing is very sharp. A lot of Battlestar Galactica alums on the writing staff. And it's a good show, and I like it, and it gets its period detail very, very well nailed down, and the look of it is terrific. My challenge with it was, because now originally the series used to be well, way back when they used to be like 39 episodes a year. Then it went down to 26, then 22, and now a year of a show may be 13 episodes, 10, 8. And as a result, there's only so much story they can cover. And so in this case, and by the way, there'll be spoilers in here because I want to talk about all this stuff. And so stop now. It basically it covers from when the Russians landed on the moon, first man on the moon, to when we essentially established bases on the moon, we and the Russians. And it's okay, and it deals with the home life of the astronauts, their adulteries, their challenges with their children, their sexual orientation, all to the good. But because it's the manned space missions, you're just waiting for them to get to Mars. You're just waiting for them to get to the outer planets. A moon base seems very ho-hum. Because, again, we want the adventure of discovery. And finding water on the moon is not as thrilling as finding life on Mars, for instance, or life in the outer moons of the solar system, or whatever. So it's just one gets a little impatient at the pace of the story, but in lieu of that, it's a very well done show. It's worth watching. But this is one where it might be nicer if they had, if we could cover a little more ground more quickly. But it's a good show, and having grown up in that era of manned spaceflight, I was a little kid in, I guess, preschool when they played John Glenn orbiting the Earth on the radio to our preschool. Just phenomenal. And so this resonates very strongly with me. If you've never read The Right Stuff by Tom Wolfe, it's a great book. I highly recommend it. It's about the original group of astronauts. Really a wonderful book, and made into a good movie by Philip Kaufman. So now let's move on to The Expanse. Now, many of you know The Expanse is also was created and run by two of my friends, Mark Fergus, Hawk Ostby, and I also know Narain Shankar from Star Trek. And it was based on the novels by J.S.A. Corey or whatever it is, and that's actually two writers writing under a pseudonym, one of whom was George R.R. Martin's assistant, and they're sort of mentored by George, and you get that feeling of him helping them craft these books. And I've read all of them. There's been, I think, 8 or 9 novels and a number of novellas, and I've basically read almost all of them, and I like them. I read them with great enjoyment. And I've been watching this series, and it took a while to get into it because it starts slowly. The first 3 seasons are very, very good, very solid. I really liked them. I thought that it told a really, really cohesive and powerful story. Visual effects are very, very good. The physics are really interesting. It glitches every now and then, but it's a good attempt to tell a story with real space physics. And then after the 3rd season, Sci-Fi canceled it, and the fans grouped together. They flew a plane over Amazon headquarters saying, renew the Expanse. And Jeff Bezos, of course, in addition to having his own space company, is a big science fiction fan. So they renewed it for an additional 2 seasons, and they just put the 4th season on Prime. And again, very well produced, strong ensemble cast, but they're following the books, and the books kind of ebb and flow. And this book in particular, the characters are extremely disparate. So whereas in the first 3 seasons they were kind of pursuing the proto-molecule, and there was a kind of story linking all of them and drawing them all together, now they're kind of on different tracks. So you have Bobby involved with smugglers, where she is, the female Marine. You have Avasarala, who's the head of the UN, having to be in an election and having to decide, about menacing belters. And then you have our key cast, the crew of the Rocinante, on a planet that's opened up another system because of a ring gate from an alien civilization. And so there's a sense of stories kind of running this way and that way and not coming together really organically, and that may be rectified in the 5th season. But reading the novels, the feeling I've gotten is that the authors have found certain characters that they found engaging, they now find less interesting. And so, for instance, James Holden, who was a very strong character in the first few novels, in the later novels, he's a much lesser character. He's kind of pushed back, whereas Naomi Nagata becomes much more central. And so as a result, possibilities that might have been followed to fruition, emotional fruition, aren't. And the characters end up, perhaps as in real life, where characters end up, splitting apart and going their separate ways. That's kind of what happens in the novels and in the show. It's still worth your time, worth your interest. It's well done, but it doesn't quite grip you, or grip me, I should say, the way the first 3 seasons did, and the novels did. And even in the novels, there are things where it's like, okay, in this novella, for instance, there's a great novella called Strange Dogs that's about some children and some aliens, and it's really, really good. I highly recommend it. But then when we meet those same children again in a later novel, we're not looking through their eyes. We're not in their hearts and in their thoughts. And so as a result, we're externalized from them, and they become more props for the storyline, which is a missed opportunity, I think. So anyway, but these are small quibbles. I mean, both For All Mankind and The Expanse are done by people who care about it passionately. The actors, the writers, the directors, clearly there's care being put into it. So compared to some of the crappy science fiction shows of the 70s and 80s and even the 90s, these are definitely a cut above. And now then we get to Watchmen. Now Watchmen, of course, is one of the greatest graphic novels ever done. It was written by Alan Moore, drawn by Dave Gibbons. Alan Moore has disavowed himself of all the TV and film versions, and Dave Gibbons is credited as co-creator, but who's the other guy? His name will not be seen anywhere. If you haven't read Watchmen, it's an absolutely terrific piece of work. It's gotten many, many accolades. I read it when I was executive story editor on Beyond Reality with Ricky Manning and Hans Beimler in the 90s. And it really holds up. It really works. And then Zack Snyder did a film adaptation which got a lot of differing viewpoints in terms of its reception. Now, I happen to really like the movie. I've watched it many times. I think it's a very good adaptation. It deviates, particularly in the ending, from the graphic novel, but I thought it was a terrific version. Great cast, particularly Haley. I was going to say Haley Osment, but it's whatever his name is as Rorschach. He's great, and one of those 3-name guys who used to be a kid actor, and it may or may not be your cup of tea, but I really liked it, and I thought it was, of all those things Zack Snyder has done, it's my favorite. And they also did a graphic motion version of the novel, of the original graphic novel that you can watch, but it's not really, it's very weird because they had a man doing all the male voices and the female voices. They should have had a man and a woman. It might have been some challenge with SAG or something that prohibited them from doing it that way, but it hurts it in terms of just watching it and enjoying it. There are different versions of the Watchmen movie. There's a version that includes an animated pirate adventure that was a comic book within the graphic novel. And again, because the ending of that is different, it kind of loses its point to some extent. But if you want to watch the entire cut, that is available on home video, DVD, and you can watch it with everything in it. And this was not in the theatrical version. But it's, again, it's worth seeing exactly what the intent was, and not a bad version at all. But now we get to the TV version, Damon Lindelof's TV version of Watchmen. Now, in the interim, DC Comics brought the characters back in sort of a prequel about all those characters. And it's a little tricky because Alan Moore has such a strong authorial voice, and his point is so clear in what he's getting at in Watchmen, that it feels very strange when other people take over that world and those characters. Now, in Damon Lindelof's version, it's set some years later. It's hewing very closely to the comic book. It's in the graphic novel in terms of how the graphic novel ended. It's a mixed bag. One thing I've been thinking about lately is about shows and if you care about the characters. And some shows can be very, very good, very well made, but you just feel distance from the characters. You don't feel the empathy. You're not emotionally engaged in these characters. And sometimes it can be a dark show, it can be a good show, a bad show. For instance, Breaking Bad, very dark show. You stay connected to those main characters and interested in them and caring about what happens to them. With Watchmen, as good as it is, I didn't have that same emotional connection. And it was And for a long time, you're sort of wondering, well, who do I identify with here? Who should I care about? And you never quite know the answer to that. You're externalized from it, or at least I was. And it was, again, it's interesting. It deals with race. It deals with the Tucson riots and race riots. Is it Tucson? Whatever, wherever it was. It isn't Tucson. I forgot. It's some other town, but it's a historical event. So it's dealing with racism and the ripple effect of racism to the modern day. It's commenting on the current state of things in our country. It's attempting to make a point, but what that point might be is a little kind of, what exactly are we trying to get at here? Again, it's interesting and challenging, and Damon Lindelof is a very talented guy, and whom I again know personally, and so I'm always rooting for him. But it's, for me, it wasn't emotionally engaging in a way that I would have hoped it would be. And so again, you can try it out. It's rather challenging to get into, but at least if you stay the course, you'll at least kind of understand the connective tissue. And definitely reading the first Watchmen graphic novel, or watching the movie before watching the TV show is an extremely good idea, so you know who the hell everyone is, or some of these people, or whatever. But again, good casting for the most part. Good visual effects. Jeremy Irons in it, but a lot of his shtick is just kind of like, why are we spending all this time with this character? It's not, for me, it was not engaging. So that's, sort of the Watchmen thing. And of course, because of the modern day, one's on HBO, one's on, Prime, one is on Apple, and you have to subscribe to all these different services. So the question is, how much money do you want to spend on all these different shows? And that is, that's your choice and my choice too. But I cut the cable a while ago because I didn't want to spend $200 for all these channels I wasn't watching. So again, what I tried to do is subscribe to a channel, watch the season in its entirety in fairly short order, and then move on. And the Golden Compass is something I'm watching as well. I've read all of Philip Pullman's Golden Compass books, the first 3 and the 2 of the trilogy he's doing now. I like his writing very much. It's a very complex world that he's creating, and they're trying to. And in the movie Nicole Kidman film, again, a good effort and visually stunning, but it's just so much ground to cover, and it really wouldn't fit into a 2-hour movie. So that was not successful financially. Now they're doing it as a TV series. TV series is okay, but there's some casting peculiarities, things that just don't really seem to resonate very well. Again, this is something you can watch and see if you like. A lot of these shows are about parallel universes, different timelines, different histories. That's sort of the flavor of the week, I think, in terms of science fiction television. And then, of course, you do have the space-going shows like The Expanse and Star Trek Discovery and Star Trek Picard, which is coming up. And again, with the Star Trek shows, Discovery, Doug Jones is in Space Command, so I'm rooting for it. I'm very fond of Doug. In fact, we're seeing him tomorrow to record his lines for the Space Command audio play prequel. And by the way, we've also just sent out a whole bunch of stuff to all of the backers. There's like 8,000 of them, and they've gotten their Twilight Zone companions and all sorts of stuff that we promised. So it's good. We're getting to it. But Star Trek Discovery has not won me over, and it's just kind of like every season is just kind of like, I don't know, train wreck, whatever. It's just like a lot of good intentions, but what exactly are they trying to say here? How does this connect into real life? What's the profound meaning of this? Twilight Zone, it was obvious. The original Outer Limits, it was obvious. And, of course, the original Star Trek. So, but I'm not finding sort of my footing on that show. But now I'm also getting around to the second and third seasons of The Handmaid's Tale. Now, previously I would watch Handmaid's Tale just on airplanes because it was so dark, such a dark show. Elaine won't watch it; she will not watch it. And I saw a panel with the creative team behind Handmaid's Tale when I was at Content London a couple of years ago, and they talked about they'll only have atrocities against women that someone somewhere in the world currently is committing. So in other words, all these terrible things that happen to women in Handmaid's Tale, that's their litmus test. So, but it's an incredibly dark show, extremely violent to women, and everyone basically, but a very good show. And earlier when I was talking about caring about the characters, I do care about these characters, and And so somehow I'm engaged in this, even though I find it dark and hard going. But I basically go to the gym. I run for 35 minutes and walk for 10, and 10 at the beginning and then 5 to cool down. And during that period, I watch The Handmaid's Tale, and so it's diverting and it keeps me running. But again, if you don't mind your TV very very dark, it's an excellent show. And so that's sort of the roundup. I think it's a good age of TV, except that it's easy for stuff to get lost. I think it's much harder for shows to find a fan following, and it is such a shame that Game of Thrones so badly screwed up its ending. I mean, they'd gone through so many years of kind of keeping on track, and they had one season that was a lot of torture, but then they veered away from that. So again, you didn't have the gratuitous nudity or the torture that they had in certain seasons, and that was good because it kind of kept you with the show. But then at the end, it was like everyone was off to their new job, and the writers just kind of it was very very tossed off and very very poor choices, and not even logical. So if you want to see how Game of Thrones should have ended, I did a Mr. Sci-Fi commentary when the series ended, basically just restructuring the final season and saying this is how it should have gone. So you can check out what I would have done. Additionally, one of our Mr. Sci-Fi fans has asked me to talk about how I create a show with Rockneil Bannon, or how by the way, I just wrote a pilot for the CW called The Theurgist, which came out really, really well, and now Warner's wants me to come in with my friend Howard Benjamin and pitch new series, so we will be going back in and we will be pitching Magic Time, among other things, and we'll see what happens. But those of you who know about my Magic Time series of novels and the Magic Time radio play will be eager to hear about that. It's a show where I've written roles for Christina Moses, who's on A Million Little Things now and who's been a friend for a long time, and Armin Shimmerman, who's a friend and with whom I worked on Deep Space Nine and other shows as well, Lazarus Man, etc. So I'll be talking about my creative process in a Mr. Sci-Fi to come, and the history of science fiction film and the history of science fiction TV, lots of stuff. But mainly we're going to be shooting an enormous amount of content this upcoming year. We'll see how much of what I'm intending to do gets done. Each year, at the beginning of the year, I lay out what my plan is for the year month by month, and then I course correct as I go. And sometimes I get more done, sometimes I get less done, sometimes there's a little bit of horse trading in it, but at the end of the day, I get where I'm going. So those of you who've been along with Space Command since the beginning know that it's been a long journey, but now we actually are about to ship the first hour. It'll include 12 minutes that the audience has not yet seen. It'll include great visual effects, great music, great sound design. It's going to be really fun. And when I talk about all these different shows that I'm watching, I think of Space Command very much as my take on what a science fiction show, particularly a space-going show, should be. The fact that I recently with the Theurgist, I had to come up with what the show was going to be and what the theme of the show was, and I realized that it was the theme not only of that show, but pretty much everything I do, and in both my writing and my life. And it's basically the ripple effect, the transformative power of compassion. And I strongly believe in that. In these dark and turbulent times, we can take personal responsibility for what we do. And so maybe we can't completely change global warming, but maybe we can buy an electric car, or maybe we can carpool. Maybe we can just open a door for someone who's struggling with their groceries, or move a garbage can if someone's trying to get in their parking space, or just let people know, that we care about them, and that we're all the same people, the same animal. And and so be mindful in your day, be kind in your day. It takes so little effort to be kind, and and really think about why you're saying what you're saying, why you're doing what you're doing, what the effect of it is. And if you're being toxic, if you're being insulting, if you're being angry, if you're being cruel, pull back. Just take a breath, count to 10, do something different. And science fiction is a big tent, and I try not to talk politics because I don't want to polarize, because I know there are compassionate people on the left, on the right, in the middle, and the more that we see each other for our hearts, and the fact that everyone wants to raise their children in safety, everyone wants to put a roof over their families' heads, and make sure they're fed, and make sure they're clothed, and have a good education, and have good medical care, etc. I mean, these are commonalities, and the more that we stay focused on that, the better I think the world is. That's just my little soapbox, and it would have been Rod Serling's and Gene Roddenberry's as well. So that's about it for now. So again, if you want to buy Space Command shares, just contact me at markzickery@gmail.com or call me 323-363-1259 if you want to donate a few bucks to Mr. Sci-Fi via our GoFundMe campaign. Please do, or Patreon. I also have Patreon, so you can throw a few bucks that way. And you can friend me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter, all of that stuff. But it's great to have my own YouTube channel. It's great to have you as my friends and compatriots. If you see me walking around somewhere, say, Mr. Sci-Fi, hello, I think you're great. and and again, if you want to be part of Space Command, if you want to build sets, if you want to make ray guns or spacesuits or any of that stuff, it's all very much welcome and very fun to have you aboard. So thanks for everything, and we'll see you again soon. And again, Happy New Year. Bye, guys.